gun shy now. So I'm hearing everything here. Everything sounds good. So I'll assume that that's the case. I will pull this out because it is so annoying. And we will get to the matter at hand, which is GPS approaches. Aloha. How we doing? This is a little beach in the island of Kauai, one that I will be visiting here at the end of June. So yeah, just throwing this out there. Hope everybody's having a great day, and we're going to get at it. Here we go. Let's go here with the GPS approach stuff and pick this right on up, shall we? So with this, what we're looking at is GPS approaches. Remember, GPS approaches are going to be, well, you've got a couple different varieties here, I guess. You could kind of look at this. GPS approaches will come in some non-precision approaches and some more that are semi-precision approaches. We'll get into that debate here in just a little bit. But what they are is that you have points that have either been fixed mathematically into an IFR certified GPS receiver. In order for you to use it for any form of navigation, it has to be IFR certified, and then it has to be updated so that you have the most current information in it. So just like approach plates, if you have an out-of-date GPS receiver, well, you can't use it when you're going to be thinking about an IFR flight. So that's the thing, is that you've got to have these things updated so that it reflects the latest mathematics being plugged into your system. They can be the small handheld type GPS receivers, which you can use just kind of for orientation. ForeFlight, again, is one of those that can be used more for just orientation. It has to be IFR certified in order for you to use it in that airplane for navigation or to fly approaches. These database updates are updated in much the same way that the approach plates and the charts are updated. So you always want to make sure that you're flying with the most current information. And it's not just legal, but it's a wonderful habit to get into. A couple of the things when they just about GPS in general. One of the things has to do with the fact that GPS, in the grand scheme of things, hasn't been around that long, but it's been around long enough that we know a few things about GPS. So the very first handheld that I had is back there on the desk, sitting there in the nerve center of all things aeronautics in Aspen, Colorado. And it is a Garmin GPS Pilot 3. And it's this small little handheld thing with this small little postage stamp grayscale display that you had. And I mean, man, I was in tall cotton when I bought that in the year 2000. That was, man, I was on the bleeding edge of aviation with that sucker. Well, now you can see it's a paperweight. I mean, that's the way things happen, things change, and they get better, thank the good Lord above. So the GPS that we have now, that we have in our aircraft, like the G1000 and some of the other GPS receivers that we have, there's like the GNS 400 series, the 500 series, the new 700 series are all just state-of-the-art touchscreen, etc., that can be added into a system later, or the G1000s that we have now that are all integrated, which are pretty amazing. And it's you know, you go back and you hear some of the old fellers like me telling young people like yourselves, well, that darn GPS stuff, that's like cheating. Well, you know, if it adds a layer of safety and situational awareness, I'll cheat all day long. So we can understand why using that is not just now, but it's the future. And it's what we talked about before, is that so much of this stuff that we have been covering is going to go away because it's all being replaced by GPS, because it's easier, it's more accurate, you know, and for the FAA and for people who update these ground-based radio navigation units, they're expensive to maintain. Well, now it's all about the satellite network that we have, and it's all about algorithms. So that's really what these are all about. So with that, we'll kind of get into this. Some of the first GPS procedures that came out, they were sort of an overlay. They would fix a point that they had based on the ground-based radio navigation units like VORs, etc., and they would affix a GPS position based on where these particular points were. So they would kind of overlay them over existing approaches that they had, so that you could use either a VOR or GPS type of things. Some of these GPS overlays, they'll have the actual word GPS in the title, so you'll be able to do it by the actual procedure itself or GPS, and that'll be in there also. And then you have some of the standalone RNAV, which is area navigation. Area navigation actually used to mean is that using VORs, using LORAN, some of these other older systems that they had as kind of a fixed base type of waypoint applications that they had for these approaches. And so now basically all of these are kind of standalone in the fact that they were not based off of another type of ground-based radio navigation approach, that these are their own standalone, where the waypoints have been computed mathematically, and they can position those basically anywhere they want them, any place where it makes sense, certainly, to be able to then navigate to these waypoints via your GPS, again, providing that it's all up to date and working properly, to be able to do this. These are going to be non-precision approaches, but as we talk here a little bit later, we will talk about some of these systems now that offer vertical guidance that are semi-precision, and they're only semi-precision because we're still getting used to using them, and these are some of the WAS approaches that also offer vertical guidance in addition to horizontal guidance. So we'll look at those here as well. This is an example here on page, whatever this page is, of an overlay. It's a VOR or GPS approach, again, where this overlay approach here on this VOR, where not only have the points been determined here by the waypoints in DME, but also they have been plugged into a GPS so that you can fly this in much the same way that you would fly the original VOR. This one is a standalone. This is one, and this is, I want to show you this on the plan view, because this is what a lot of these look like. They almost look like a cross, if you will. You'll see here where the airport is, and then you'll see a relatively long stretch here that might have some form of a holding pattern in it, and then to the left and to the right, coming in like from a couple different directions, you'll see an approach fix over here that you can again make your transition from an arrival to these initial approach fixes to begin your approaches here. Notice the star looking things here, again, these waypoints that have been established mathematically, and these are the things that you would then fly to for with your GPS receiver. And again, your profile view comes down here nice and easy, which is a little bit easier. That any time that you can have some form of vertical navigation that can assist your approach, that's always going to be easier, I think. And if it's easier, my view is that it's going to be a little safer, because anytime that you have like these multiple step downs that you just have more and more things that you have to keep track of and make sure that you're not busting altitudes and make sure that you're getting to those particular points when you're supposed to be getting to those points. So that's, you know, it's always easier if you can just have one thing that offers you the lateral and vertical component, and you just fly that sucker right on down the tube. Again, that's just my view. When you're looking here, the wide area augmentation system, we talked about this when we went through this in the fall, about what that means. What this is the fact that not only do you have a constellation of at least 24 satellites on 6 different orbital planes, and we also talked about the fact that there are actually 41, and I'm not so sure that we don't have 42 up there right now that we use here in our US-based system. But we do have these that are where the signals have been refined by use of ground stations. So now not only do you have your receiver in your aircraft, which is being interrogated here by the satellites above, but we also have ground stations that are refining the signal that could take a point where, as we have seen in the classroom before, where you can see you have just like a regular GPS signal that says, okay, here is this particular item here within 10 meters. Well, you know, if you can, you know, it's a big sky. If you can pinpoint something within 33 feet, that's pretty good, right? Well, the new stuff that we have, especially with the wide area augmentation system, they can pinpoint things within a meter. So, and in some cases, they can tell you where your GPS receiver is located in your airplane. Some of these things out here right now, my watch, for crying out loud, if I can use the GPS function that's just standalone here in my watch, it'll tell me what side of the sidewalk I'm walking on. I mean, it's just crazy now how accurate these things are. So it's no surprise that the WAAS, the type of systems that we use with GPS, is going to take over any form of ground-based radio navigation, and it eliminates a lot of problems here as we do this. So everything is going GPS. So with some of these things here again, not only do you get with some of the GPS signals here the lateral guidance, but you can also get the vertical navigation. And you can see this here. You have the RNAV, the area navigation, as well as VNAV, which is the vertical navigation. And it's like an ILS glide slope, but try not to confuse that with a precision versus non-precision. You're going to get in, for instance, with the ILS, we talk about glide slope. Well, in the GPS world, we talk about glide path, just to kind of separate here, just from the nomenclature standpoint, the difference between a ground-based radio navigation approach and a GPS WAAS type of approach, where you have a glide path or a vertical path that will show up. For instance, you know, in the G1000, when your glide slope is, you're dialed into the localizer and you're flying an instrument approach like we did at Kahului, and you'll see the diamond go up and down here with the glide slope on an ILS. Well, in the same way, when we fly a WAAS approach, we'll get the lateral guidance here with a magenta line, but we will also have a magenta arrowhead that'll float up that same scale to tell us where our flight path or our glide path may be, to give us that vertical guidance there with a GPS algorithm versus a radio signal. Hope that makes sense. You can look here at the alphabet soup here and understand what all of these things mean here. You've already read these. These things are not different. The big one here has to do with the LPV approach. The LPV approach, that's lateral. It's a lateral approach that also has vertical guidance in it in a semi-precision manner. Where does it talk about the LPV? I wanted to put that on here and I can't find it. I know it's on here somewhere. Here we go. Vertical guidance here, the LPV approach. We're going to look at something here as well. This talks about some of the VNAV information here outlined here by GPS. And so this is the LPV approach, which when you look at this, it will show a DA in much the same way that an ILS will show a decision altitude or decision height with this. But we still kind of consider this a semi-precision approach. This is where the debate comes in, because you have people that It depends. And understand that you know, when I prep these classes to do these video pieces, I go back and I look and I read, and I know that some of these things are dated. Certainly the text that we're using here is a bit dated relative to the new information here with regard to GPS and you know, LPV approaches, etc. Even the FAA information is a little bit dated. It's a little bit more up to date than this, but not quite. And so I have a couple of questions that I want to ask a couple of my friends at the FAA about a couple of things just from points of clarification, and I'll bring those to you on an additional module here as well. So these things here, the local area augmentation, the LAS or systems coming into play, this is when they believe that all of the precision approach pieces will come into play with regard to WAS or LAS approaches. Here also, and you can look at this here. This all is just kind of makes sense here with what we have looked at in the fall. And as I said before, you can look at a couple of these RNAV or these RNAV GPS type of approaches, and you can see again they sort of look like they're laid out here in kind of a cross. That is more typical of what you might see with this type of an RNAV or GPS approach. With this, the one thing I want to show you here are the minimums that you can look at. So for instance, LPV, which is going to be a WAS approach here with this, you can see how far down that will get you compared to something with just a vertical assistance type of a thing. And so it gets you down a little bit further, certainly better than circling. Not quite where you might see an ILS, but it does get you down there quite a bit closer and giving you more of an opportunity to land that airplane in reduced visibility conditions. So again, you can read here, this is just basically what I was telling you here as well. So multiple approaches to the same runway. You'll look at these. One of the things that you're going to see here is you'll see the RNAV Zulu, runway 31, RNAV Yankee, runway 31. And I want you to look at this because what happens here is that you'll have especially RNAV approaches here, where you'll have the you know, kind of the approaches to the same runways here. But I want to show you something. If I can get there. Gosh, I don't know why this is so slow. Anytime that there's a picture or an illustration on this thing, it just slows down to a crawl. So if you look here, this one offers an LPV component here on this approach. And I believe that most of the Zulu approaches will. And if I'm not mistaken, if you go backwards from the alphabet, you know, you have Zulu, and then, you know, kind of moving backwards, you'll have Yankee. The further away you get from Z, I think the higher the minimums. Don't quote me on that. That's one of the questions that I have. But I do believe that the Zulu RNAV approaches will give you some form of an LVP approach here that will actually get you down pretty darn close to the ground there. Very, very much like an ILS, even though we still consider this a semi-precision approach and not necessarily classify it as a precision approach like we would with a PAR or an ILS. RNP is something that comes up here again. This is going to be a type of a thing that we still see more in the commercial world with regards to tolerances here. I think you're probably going to start to see this more and more in general aviation here as well. You can look at this and read what RNP stands for and how it looks. We'll show you here one of these charts. And you can see here is that when you have this RNP here, it allows you to kind of fly these curves here like this. Well, we can still fly DME arcs with area navigation. That can be plugged into to your GPS receivers in your airplane enslaved to an autopilot. So those things we can still do, but in this case it kind of happens a little bit different. And in order to use the RNP stuff right now, the way it works is that you have to have special aircraft and aircrew training on this RNP to actually use this. So you can read that about RNP. And again, it is pretty precise. And for the fast movers, it's a great way to get in and out of airports. And guys, there we are. That's GPS. So you can look at that again, looking at these plates, looking at the questions at the end of the chapter. There aren't very many of them. And then the next one that we do is going to be the ILS. My assumption is, I don't know if that's going to be a one-part video or a two-part video on the ILS. I am thinking it's just going to be a one-part, and the only reason that I say this, normally it would be multi-part, but we pretty much broke that down pretty well when we were talking about instrument approaches anyway. So I think we've already knocked that out, and I'll let you know once we put this up here for the video piece. So there's your GPS stuff. Another thing that I might recommend that you guys look at here is that when you go to the FAA website, faa.gov, and you look under handbooks, so if you go to training and testing, and then you go to airman testing with things, you have books for aircraft, but you also have books for airmen, airwomen, as we do the training pieces. And you can look for handbooks. So just like the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, which is the FAA's version of what you're using for the VFR stuff, there is also an instrument flying handbook that's available for people. It's a free download there as well. And they have a little bit more updated information on GPS stuff. If you have time, it's pretty good to download that. Some of the illustrations I think are a bit more fresh than some of the illustrations that we have here for these types of instrument approaches. So if you'd like to, you can look that up as well. There's nothing here, guys, that says you can't go above and beyond what we're using here to help ensure understanding. So with that, I'll throw that out. Again, that's the Instrument Flying Handbook with the FAA, and they also have an Instrument Procedures Handbook there as well that, again, from a visual standpoint, their illustrations are pretty awesome. And that one, I believe, the Instrument Procedures Handbook, I want to say that was updated in 2017. So just for your own edification, those are available. So guys, there you go. The next up we have here is we have the ILS with that, and guys, we are fast approaching the very end of this textbook, and you guys have knocked out an awful lot of pages. We're going to finish strong here. We're going to get through the ILS. We're going to get into some of the holds here on chapter 28. We're going to get into some partial panel stuff, and then guys, test prep. That's where it all comes down. Okay, so I will talk with you here on chapter 27. See ya.